How do the gods of chaos bind a soul to their will? They do not command outright, instead they lure, weaving promises through shadows and flame, filling the air with whispers that slither into the mind. In the twisting depths of the warp, where sanity is a fragile memory, they reveal themselves with promises that are impossible to ignore and harder to resist. They speak to the deepest desires, laying out visions so vivid they seem to pulse with life. A paradise of endless pleasure, a battlefield of unending carnage, each vision tailored to stir the darkest parts of a soul. The gods of chaos speak not only to emotion but to the raw essence of desire itself, carving deep into the soul to reveal truths that even their victims would deny. They strip away pretenses, exposing the darkest, most grotesque cravings lurking beneath a yearning for power. The thrill of violence, the hunger for forbidden pleasures. In this naked vulnerability where depravity becomes irresistible, they thrive. It is here in the darkest recesses of the soul that they root themselves, feeding on secret vices and unspoken horrors, twisting desire into chains that bind tighter with each whispered promise, each seductive call to excess. It is through these fractures in the armor of the soul that the chaos gods whisper their promises, seeking entry to twist and corrupt. Yet even gods require something tangible to latch onto: a flaw, a craving, a shadow. For those strong of will and fortified in purpose, it is far harder for these insidious gods to find purchase. They will pass over a soul if they sense no fertile ground for their lies to take root, no deep-seated desires to exploit. The chaos gods are hunters, but they are also connoisseurs, selecting only those whose souls bear the faintest scent of corruption, a glimmer of hunger they can coax into a blaze. This is vividly illustrated in Soul Hunter, when a Night Lord, subdued by psychic force and rendered unconscious, is offered up to summoned fragments of the four gods. In his helpless state, each god circles, evaluating him, seeking some weakness, some unguarded desire or ambition they might exploit. Their offers are potent, carefully tailored, but not indiscriminate. Each god knows that without the seeds of corruption or desire to latch onto, their whispers would fall on barren ground. The gods circle, waiting to uncover a glimmer of want or fear, to see if his soul holds anything they might claim as their own. "Talos!" A voice spoke from the blackness. He turned to meet it, hands reaching for weapons that didn't exist here, wherever he was. The speaker was a Night Lord. Talos recognized the armor instantly, for it was his own. In the nothingness, he faced himself, staring at his armored image with something approaching fury. What is this madness? "A test," his reflection said, removing its helm. The face beneath the helmet was and was not his own visage. Eyes of silver stared back at him, and the center of his forehead was branded with a stylized rune of sickening devotion. The burn mark was still fresh, still trickling blood down his reflection's face. "You are not me," Talos said. "I would never wear the slave mark of the ruinous powers." "I am what you might be." His image smiled, revealing teeth as silver as his eyes. "If you were bold enough to unlock your potential." The Chaos God's vision is a masterful assault crafted with a precision meant to slip through even the iron will of a space marine. Talos, a warrior bred to know no fear, finds himself confronted by an image that transcends terror. It is a violation of identity, a glimpse of his own face branded with the mark of subjugation to the ruinous powers, an alternative path should he waver for even a fraction of a second. This doppelganger, smiling with silver eyes and blood-streaked cheeks, twists the very image of strength and loyalty into a sick parody of devotion. With every poisoned word and eerie smile, the god peels away Talos' armor of contempt and self-assurance, inching closer to the raw nerve of doubt he's buried so deeply. This vision isn't meant to scare, but to provoke, to evoke the fury and revulsion the god can turn inward, transforming his ironclad will into a weapon of corruption. For in that fleeting moment, Talos may come to question, may, for the barest second, consider the power in submission, and the god waits, sensing every crack in the facade, patient as it pries him toward the unthinkable. Then the first god plays his hand, conjuring a vision that warps Talos' very essence and reshapes his pride into temptation. "Be silent. The others come." He was right. Other figures manifested about him, One behind, one to the left, one to the right, taking the cardinal points around where he stood in the darkness. He couldn't focus upon them. Each time he turned, he saw nothing except the others existing at the edge of his vision. "This," said the first figure, "is what I offer you. I am Slarnath. I am the one who thirsts. I am a god more than your gene-father ever was. And this," the figure repeated, "is what I offer you." Talos opened his eyes to a battlefield he claimed, heart and soul. The enemy, the Imperial army, was reduced to a graveyard of wrecked tanks and corpses that reached from horizon to horizon. He stood above his warriors as they kneeled before him, feeling the pleasant sting of some vicious new battle chemical stimulant flooding his veins. He was wounded, for there were cracks in his swollen armor where reddish ichor flowed down his warplate. These wounds, great rents and rips in his flesh, open to the chill air of the battlefield, ached with the pleasure so intense he cried his thanks to the stars above. Was this what it was to be a Primarch? To laugh at wounds that would destroy even the Astartes? To feel war as an amusing diversion while crushing a million enemies under the might of invincible armies? Perhaps this was what the Night Haunter had felt. This exaltation. Blood-slicked claws tore fresh rents in his cheek as he scratched himself, laughing at the delicious pain. Pain itself became a joke to those who could never die. "Prince Talos!" His troops were shouting up at him. "Prince Talos!" No, not shouting, worshipping. They bowed and cried and prayed for his attention. "This is wrong," Talos growled. At first, the vision seems to embody everything Talos could desire. Absolute power, a battlefield drenched in the blood of his enemies, and an army kneeling in worship. Yet a hidden travesty lurks beneath this triumphant facade. His warriors do not bow to him out of loyalty. They prostrate themselves to the dark god that now owns him, chanting his name but offering their prayers to his master, leaving him a mere conduit for another's power. Talos's victories are hollow. His triumphs claimed not for his own glory, but to feed the insatiable thirst of his patron. Every ounce of power, every moment of pleasure, and every wound that fuels his twisted euphoria binds him further into servitude, stripping him of free will, reducing him to a vessel for another's will. This is no liberation, but an eternal chain, eternal servitude, his very existence twisted to serve as little more than a puppet in a god's theater of depravity. As Talos grapples with the chilling reality of his vision, the next of the Pantheon makes themselves known. "You are the shaper of fate," Talos said. "Vandred is one of your slaves." The figure nodded, his black eyes a perfect image of Talos's own. "He is one of mine, a champion of my cause, a beneficiary of my gifts, and not a slave. His will as his own. I believe differently. Believe what you will. He's of some value to me. You, however, could be so much more. I have no interest in power." That was the first sensation that drummed from his twin hearts, as though they pushed strength itself through his body with each dual beat. This was not the laughable power of blithe immortality and pleasure, but something altogether more familiar. He turned his head to regard the others on the command deck. The Atramentar, all 8 of them, knelt before him. Beyond them, the bridge crew worked their stations, each and every one a human with a servitor aide, all working diligently. He gestured to the Terminators abasing themselves before him. "Rise." They rose, taking their places, flanking his throne. "We are 1 hour from our destination, Lord," said one of the mortal bridge officers. Talos closed his eyes and smiled at the images he saw imprinted in his mind. "When we re-enter real space, seek the engine signatures of 3 freighters using the third moon as a shield against Auspec's returns. Cripple them quickly and ready first, second and third claws for boarding actions." The whispers began. They thought he couldn't hear them. The whispers about his new power, about the 10th Company's resurging strength. Let them praise him and whisper. He need no obsequiousness to his face. Talos relaxed into the command throne, letting his thoughts drift into the infinity of what was yet to come, feeling the skeins of fate like 1,000 threads under his fingertips. Each strand led to a possible future that played out before his eyes if he merely concentrated for a single moment. The future is unwritten. He took a breath, feeling naked without his armor and swallowing the rising urge to slay these apparitions before him. In this moment, Talos stands at the precipice of temptation, confronted by the figure's assurances that power awaits him, an enhancement of the foresight he inherited from the Night Haunter himself, promising to amplify his already formidable capabilities. Yet this allure carries a grotesque cost. The thought of corrupting the sacred gift bestowed by his father fills him with rage. The very essence of his identity hangs in the balance as he grapples with the seductive prospect of wielding a power that could elevate him while risking the taint of his most cherished trait. As Talos rejects this aspect of the gods, another takes its place. Nurgle, the Plague Father, casts his gaze upon Talos. Unlike his predecessors, Nurgle finds no cracks in Talos's soul, no seed of despair or decay that could flourish into allegiance. There is no rot in which corruption can fester. The fragment of Nurgle speaks to Talos. I was summoned here, but you will never be one of my champions. I have no use for you, and you have no will to wield the power I offer. Nurgle's rejection is almost a twisted mercy, revealing a truth about the gods of chaos. If a soul is entirely unwilling, the gods will not waste their time, without even the smallest seed of temptation to nurture. Nurgle moves on, indifferent, an acknowledgement that true corruption requires, at the very least, a willing crack in the armor of the soul. As Talos's vision fades, he faces the final god Khorne, the blood god, who emerges in a bestial apparition, hunched over and trembling, barely able to control the bloodlust boiling within. But Talos, now hardened to these temptations, meets Khorne with open scorn, daring to mock the god of slaughter. His ridiculing tone seems not to bring out rage, but desperation, and as Talos begins to slip from the vision's grip, Khorne's frustration surfaces. The god urges Talos to accept his gifts. But as Talos's skill in foresight offers little to a lord of carnage, a tool not often utilized by the followers of the blood god, Khorne's motives come into question. Perhaps instead of seeking to claim Talos for his own, he simply seeks to rob his rivals of a formidable instrument. Perhaps Khorne knows the extent of Talos's capabilities should he choose to accept the gifts of the other gods. Whoever summoned you to win me to your allegiances wasted their time. This is almost laughable. Time is short, the figure grinned, and such sights I have to show you. Talos had more insults to offer, more rejections to voice, but found he couldn't speak. His lungs locked, feeling like slabs of quivering stone behind his fused ribs. It was a savage echo of the moment he'd been poisoned, and he felt the same sensation as the meat within his body shuddered, stealing his breath. This time, as he fell to his knees, his breathless wheezes weren't curses, but laughter. The warrior of blood was fading. Talos knew in the world of flesh, his lungs were purging the taint that brought him here. "Witness my gifts," Karnath said, desperate now, ferocious in his eagerness. "See the strength I offer. Do not abandon this one chance." "Go back to hell!" The Night Lord grinned through bloody teeth and vomited black mist into the nothingness. As Talos's body purges the poison, Khorne senses his consciousness stirring even before Talos himself feels it. The blood god's impatience intensifies, calling after Talos, unwilling to let his prey escape without a final attempt to claim him, as if his rage alone could somehow drag Talos back from his flesh into his domain, back into the warp. These gods flaunt tantalizing visions, preying on vulnerability, a grotesque reflection of humanity's darkest aspects. Greed, ecstasy, and an insatiable hunger for power. With an appearance of control, they lure their victims into a perilous dance, their voices promising exaltation while hiding chains beneath. Yet, the moment their grip begins to slip, their calm facade shatters, revealing their true desperation. They are not merely entities of temptation, but relentless hunters, probing for even the faintest hint of doubt or desire. A soul that remains steadfast becomes a bitter disappointment, leading them to abandon it, at least until they find a chink in the armor. In this grim theater of the warp, Talos stands as a formidable bastion. With each visitation from the gods, he becomes a testament to the balance between desire and defiance. The gods claw at the walls he has built, desperate to expose his vulnerabilities, but Talos remains vigilant, embodying humanity's unyielding spirit against the corruptive embrace of the very beings that thrive on his weaknesses. Or perhaps he merely denies the pantheon out of spite. In standing resolute against the insidious temptations of the ruinous powers, Talos not only echoes his father's legacy but forges his own path, one defined by defiance and an unwavering commitment to resist the seductive allure of chaos, no matter how bright his hatred of the Imperium of Man burns.